Hi, everyone. Today I have a guest speaker with me. His name is Joseph Kalmars. He's a good friend of mine. You might have noticed this in one of my previous videos, but in Iron Man 2, I actually tagged Joseph. That was out of request by Joseph. Today, him and I are going to we're going to review the movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is based off a graphic novel series. It stars Michael Cera and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and it has the same director as Shaun of the Dead. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a great film. It has both comic book and video game effects, and it uses them very, very well. Joseph, how did you feel about that aspect of the film?
I thought they did a really nice job. It wasn't so corny that it bugged you, but you could see where they used those effects. It made the environment and the ambiance of the movie it cleaned it up really nicely.
Throughout the film, Scott Pilgrim is interested in a girl. Her name is Ramona Flowers. He meets her at a party that one of his good friends is hosting. And throughout the film, he finds out that he has to battle her 7 evil ex-boyfriends in order to date this girl. One good and bad thing I personally felt about the film was the first 2 battles of the films were done so incredibly well that by the time you see certain other battles, like these 2 kids from a rock band, I think they were twins, it just didn't feel as fun as some of those previous battles in the film. But then at the end of the film, it saves it by doing a really awesome battle with the final evil ex-boyfriend. Joseph, how did you feel about the battle with the evil exes throughout the film?
I thought the first couple ones were really detailed, really well done. The one with the twins wasn't so much a battle between them as the really cool monsters that they did. Even though the battle was shorter and it wasn't really that emphasized, what they did with it was really cool. And the battle at the end was just awesome to me. I loved the whole thing where his ex shows up and then Mega Scott shows up and he has to battle all those guys beforehand. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Jason Schwartzman, he plays the final evil ex-boyfriend of the film. Jason Schwartzman, I reviewed the film Fantastic Mr. Fox earlier. He does the voice of the son in that movie. And he's also the son of actress Talia Shire, who is in the Rocky films as Adrian, which I'm going to review for you later on in the future. But back to Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim, another thing that it does well is it's truly the first film where you feel that Michael Cera truly belongs where he is in the film. Michael Cera, the thing about Scott Pilgrim is he's not really strong, but he's not extremely weak either. He's one of those characters that's in between. He doesn't know what he wants to do. But he's kind of its own character, which is what Scott Pilgrim should be. Joseph, how do you feel about the Scott Pilgrim character?
I thought him being gangly, but not weak, more agile, kind of made the character, because having someone who was bigger and stronger, you wouldn't have been able to connect to that person and the struggles that he's going through. That gangly, weak kid that turns out to be not so bad of a fighter and has a lot of heart, really, that was a really nice character design.
Throughout Scott Pilgrim, Scott thinks that he's normally in a video game when he's battling somebody. And what made Scott Pilgrim effective is not only did it use effects that you would see in games like Sonic the Hedgehog or something you would see in a Star Wars-based game. Sorry, that was Joseph's phone. It used effects from many games, and that's what kind of made it its own thing. Is it used things from many games, but it became its own thing using those references from those other games. Like, for example, if Scott punched somebody, he would use a punch effect from one game. And if let's say he transformed into something, that would use an effect from a different game. Joseph, how did you feel about that aspect of the film?
Using the different effects, it was cool. I loved the special effects that they used in it to make it seem like a video game. Whenever he killed someone, there would be coins dropping, and he'd go and pick them up. It was just the little things that made it seem like a video game, made the premise of the movie it just cleaned it up and made it really nice.
Another famous actress was in this film. Her name is Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She was in Sky High, Live Free or Die Hard, and I believe she's going to be in a future Night of the Living Dead film. She does a very good job playing Ramona Flowers. I liked how her hair color always changed throughout the film. It represented that she wasn't always doing the same thing all the time. She was kind of this special girl with many hobbies and many different interests and didn't want to do the same thing all the time. Joseph, how did you feel about the Ramona Flowers character?
It was really cool because she was so different from Scott. Well, it was a cool contrast in how they were still attracted. The character just was designed really well. She did a really nice job acting it and working with Scott Pilgrim. It was really well done.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World is a very well done film. It's a film that you watch it and you're glad you watched it. It's a film where you watch it and you realize to yourself there's a lot of effects that was never used before. Like, for example, Joseph and I right here, if we were in Scott Pilgrim, you would see a little information box saying, Tom Richardson, age 20, occupation, current job. It would say things like that you would see in video games like The Sims. Whenever Scott was fighting somebody, occasionally you would see like a life bar. And like, wasn't that right? You see like a life bar on top of him and see how much life that he had.
Combo counters, too.
He had combo counters. You would see his score when he fought people. Like I said before, though, the downfalls of the film is there's certain scenes that almost don't feel as special as other scenes. And I think when you're making a film like Avatar or some other really good films like Iron Man, it keeps a consistency throughout the film that makes it so outstanding. And even though Scott Pilgrim does have many outstanding scenes, there are scenes in it where you're just like, that just doesn't feel right. Joseph, how do you feel? What was kind of the negatives of Scott Pilgrim that they could have worked on, do you think?
What you said, the emphasis on certain scenes. I think it wasn't so much they didn't emphasize them. They emphasized them in a more passive way. Like the battle with the twins. He wasn't actually running around fighting the big monsters were, but it was still kind of, the camera was more on him and the twins than the actual monsters. And it wasn't very fast. It was emphasized in a different way that most people wouldn't really look for and wouldn't consciously think about.
Another neat aspect of the film is, if in some ways it feels like you're almost watching an arcade game. Like, let's say you walk into an arcade and a demo's playing because nobody's playing the game. Like, you know how it would say game over in front of the screen, or it would say, it would show like the high scores of the day, and it would show stuff like that throughout the film. Effects like that make this film feel like you're watching a game or reading a comic book. It's a comic book put into a movie, and that's what really makes it feel well. It doesn't, even though Iron Man was a great film, it felt like a movie trying to be a comic book, and Scott Pilgrim was a comic book within a film. And I feel that's where Scott Pilgrim succeeded, and that's where other films can work on to make great comic book adapted films. Joseph, how do you feel this film did comic book adapted wise?
Well, it felt like you were watching a video game or a comic book. He was going through his boss battles. He was talking to other people. It also made it hard to watch for certain people because you have to be able to accept the premise of it because it's not going to be ruled by basic reality. Like he sees her running through his mind and stuff, or he gets killed and he comes back. Stuff like that made it hard for, say, my parents or some of my other friends who aren't interested in comic books or video games as much to accept the premise of the film. But if you come into it with an open mind, that premise is, I haven't really seen it before, or I haven't seen it done this well, and that made it so much fun to watch.
Scott Pilgrim is available on DVD and Blu-ray. This is my good friend Joseph Calmars here. Do you have any other comments about Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
You should buy it.
You should buy it. It's available on Blu-ray, DVD, and as a Blu-ray combo pack. It is also available in the iTunes Store for download. So check it out. It's called Scott Pilgrim versus the World.